Hello and welcome back to my channel. Today I wanted to talk about something a little bit different, which is my book Project Rose. I think officially I am now finally calling it Lockhart and Beckett instead of Project Rose, and I feel like I still need a subtitle because to me Lockhart and Beckett would be the name of the series, and then I will still need one specific title for this specific first book in it. So I have been calling it at the moment Secrets of the Unveiled, just because the big bad guy agency thing in this universe is called The Unveiled, but I'm not entirely satisfied with that title. And the thing is, the book is finished. I have finished the first draft, the zero draft, whatever you want to call it. And the reason why I'm making this small vlog is because recently I also finished a first round of revisions. So for a little bit of background context, last year I was finishing my second round of revisions for Demons, The Art of Summoning Demons, which is the first book that I ever truly finished in English. And when I was finishing revising it and doing the second draft, I really thought I needed another project to sink my teeth into. I remember it's exactly pretty much a year ago, so in February of 2022, that I decided to do a sort of flash fiction February. So in January of 2022 I finished doing my draft 2 of The Art of Summoning Demons, and in February I was at a loss as to what to do next. I decided to play this little flash fiction type of game, and one of the flash fiction pieces that I ended up writing turned out to become one of the first scenes in Project Rose. I didn't have a proper idea for what I wanted the story to really be like for Project Rose. I just had the inspiration for it, which was the last season of Angel, the spin-off of Buffy. In the last season, they take over this evil corporation of lawyers after they defeat them at the end of season 4, and basically they have to deal with this absurd world of mixing corporate stuff and mixing with that the supernatural universe of Angel and vampires and demons and sacrifices and like all of that kind of stuff, and it's just really, really fun.
Insane. It's mostly paralegals and secretaries. Pretty boring, really.
Filthy harlot! I'm gonna tear your neck out!
So I love that mix of both those elements, and I really wanted to try and convey that in Project Rose. That was my main inspiration for it. I knew a long time ago that my main character Rose, first of all, was going to be named Rose, and second, that her thing was going to be that she was a regular person, or at least she thought so, but she could see supernatural beings. She could see through their glamour, their disguises, anything that made them look like regular humans. She could notice the difference between a regular person and a supernatural being. And that's what essentially gets her the job in this corporation that I've named Lockhart and Beckett. So I knew sort of the basic elements of the story, and then it took for me to do that flash fiction exercise to figure out where this was going to go. Because when I did that exercise, it wasn't so much that I outlined anything or that I figured out the actual storyline of, you know, the supernatural elements of it, but it was more that I figured out Rose as a character and how she was going to lead the story, because that first moment, that first scene, was very much her being unsure of herself, lack of confidence, maybe hanging out with friends that were slightly toxic, and I knew then that the main theme to me in the story was going to be found family. It was going to be about her figuring out that hanging out with toxic people that were sucking out the energy out of her was not going to be the right route for her, and that she was going to need to grow in confidence and get rid of them, not in a murder way, and gain some new ones that were going to become her found family, and essentially was going to be her team as she became part of this corporation. And the corporation, I just wanted it to still have all the elements that I love writing about, which is magic and murder. So it became a sort of police/FBI type of agency in London that deals with supernatural events. So murders to do with supernatural beings, things like that. Things that could make the supernatural world visible for regular people, which would be a big no-no. So they have to deal with, you know, the aftermath of some of these things, etc. So that was my universe. That's what I wanted to build in terms of the world. So when it starts at the very beginning, Rose is a receptionist at the ground floor area of this company called Lockhart and Beckett, which is in central Liverpool Street area-ish of London. And she just has a regular job. She's just a regular person. She suffers from those visions where she sees randomly people have a sort of mask coming onto their face, and she sees them different than they are, and they look like monsters or things like that. And she always has been thinking for a long time that it was her, she was the problem. And then as her job progresses, an incident happens, and that's where we start the story. There's been an incident, and she doesn't really say exactly what it is, but then we slowly understand that someone reacted weirdly to her presence at the reception desk, and that this person was a client from the floors above the floor 13. And above floor 13 in Lockhart and Beckett, they have this kind of secrecy around the upper floors, and no one really has access to them except the teams that work up there and the clients that go there, and they have to have this special key and switch from one lift to the other on the 12th floor in order to go higher up. So it's sort of like the dream of people who work in the company is to be like finally a member of the upper floors and get their key to go to the upper floors and everything. It's like a big deal. So Rose gets offered an opportunity to work on the upper floors, and she thinks it's hush money because it happened very soon after the incident, and she doesn't think that she deserves it, and she doesn't really understand why she's being given this opportunity. So she doesn't partly want to accept it at first, but then on the other hand, she's talking to these really toxic friends in her daily life, and they're sort of pushing for her to, you know, have enough money to move out of her flat. They're sort of all moving on with their lives. One of them just got engaged and everything, and she sort of feels like she's stagnating. She's staying behind while they're all moving on with their lives and becoming more adults, and she feels like maybe this is gonna be the chance for her to have more money, move out of her flat with her flatmate who treats her like crap, get over her ex-boyfriend, things like that. So she sort of thinks this is maybe the opportunity that's going to help change her life, and she's not wrong. And then very soon she's being given this training session with videos that are basically explaining the existence of supernatural beings and how they exist in the real world, and she's gonna have to deal with them. It's gonna be part of her daily job now that she's accepting this opportunity. And yeah, I basically pantsed my way through it for a few months during 2022, and I wrote it pretty fast, and it was just towards the end that I think I took maybe a 2-month break where I couldn't write anymore, and I had to do other stuff. And I think it was maybe because I was really struggling with the idea of finishing this story, finishing this book, and what would the end scenes be. So it took me a while to do the end scenes, and then finally I finished it. I think it was in October of last year, I think, maybe.
Close your eyes, hear the voice within calling. This heavy load got under your skin. All in, you got the white knuckles holding on it tight, keeping your feelings bottled up inside, heading for collision in the night. To really live, you gotta die. Breathe in, breathe out. Hey, come alive. Breathe in, breathe out. Look at the colors, colors, colors. Right.
then I got really scared to look at it again, mostly because I knew I had pantsed my way through it. I had outlined the ending, so when I reached the end of Act 2, I knew I had so many threads of the story that I needed to tie up and so many loose ends, and I had to do something that made sense for the ending, or I knew it was going to be even worse to deal with the revisions. So I actually did work with those types of little cards. So I had a few of these for each of my characters' storyline, and I placed them on a corkboard and everything just to know the order of things and whose storyline was going to affect what in the main story. Although I only have one POV, which is pretty much Rose's, I have a lot of different characters whose storylines didn't matter. So I did that exercise in order to figure out what was going to happen towards the end, and once I figured it out, I wrote the end. However, I wrote a lot of the book during things like Camp Nano and at the time worldwide write-a-thon weekends. So a lot of those challenges require you to have as many words as you can, or at least you set up challenges for yourself to write as many words as you can. And so I never looked back. So I would very often like continue writing, knowing there was an issue with a scene, knowing maybe this scene was going to be unnecessary, things like that. And I would sometimes just write down notes on the side saying, fix this later, or you're going to have to look at that later, or this will need to be deleted. You know, I just knew, and I wrote it down in my notes, but I didn't touch it. I just continued and I never looked back. Which is why I was so terrified of looking back at it now that it was all finished and done and dusted. And it was a beast as well. I think I ended up, let me open Scrivener because I don't remember the word count. My word count ended up being 107,000 words. In comparison, The Art of Summoning Demons was 94k, so 107k was a lot and felt like a lot to deal with, and I just didn't want to reread it. So I got myself into another project, which is my space opera romance one. And then I knew that I was going to have to look at The Art of Summoning Demons again because it had gone through critic partners' feedback, and I wanted to finally revise it based on that feedback. So I didn't touch Project Rose for a few months, and then while I was busy revising The Art of Summoning Demons based on my critique partner's feedback, I got freaked out by something someone said about Scrivener, you know, sometimes losing their whole documents and stuff like that, and I was just like, I'm just gonna go into Project Rose, which I hadn't properly saved in a while, in a different way than Scrivener. So it was just like, I'm just gonna go and export it in Word and in PDF. So when I did that, and as I did that, I reread the beginning. And when I reread the beginning, I couldn't seem to stop. So this was completely accidental. I just started rereading the story and I was like, yeah, this is where I'm gonna need to fix that, and then started making notes in the PDF that I had just created. And we're sitting here 2 weeks after I started doing this, and it's sitting at 379 comments. Granted, a few of these are just correcting this phrase, changing that word, or I noticed a few spelling mistakes here and there. So I think that's the majority of them. But as I was doing this, I was also putting input about the actual developmental edits I was going to need to do. And I realized I was having loads of fun. I was having so much fun rereading that story, and I loved it. It was so strange because I was so certain I was going to hate rereading it, that it was going to be painful, that I was going to have to deal with the mess that I had left myself by pantsing my way through this novel. And yet, no, it was fun. It was a lot better than I expected. There was a lot less that I ended up thinking this is going to need to change. The spots where I had noted down this will need to be fixed and this will need to change, that was the main thing. These were the main elements that I realized as I was reading. Yep, that was correct. That was going to be the one that I needed to delete all of these scenes and change those scenes, etc. It was pretty much spot on. It made me feel so much better about the story and also myself as a writer, because it made me think, compared to The Art of Summoning Demons, which when I reread it the first time, I knew what the problems were, I didn't want to deal with them, and I sort of avoided them, and then when I had to rewrite it, it had such a ripple effect on other chapters and other scenes that I dreaded having to do it, and I dragged my feet a little bit. And then when I did it, I had to rewrite quite a few scenes because they had to be completely changed based on the developmental edits. Here in Project Rose, I don't actually think I'm going to need to do as much rewriting. It's going to be a lot of fixing plot holes and issues here and there, but I don't think they're gonna have as big of a ripple effect as the ones I had noticed in The Art of Summoning Demons. Now, maybe I'm still too close to the story, and maybe if I let it rest a bit longer and come back to it later, I'll notice more changes that are needed, that are bigger than what I thought, or maybe once it goes through critic partners' feedback, it's not gonna stand as strong as The Art of Summoning Demons did. So I'm not sure about that yet, but at the moment I feel pretty good about it. And then I also realized that the reason why it was so fun to reread and work on was because I gave myself a good amount of time throughout one day to deal with the story. Basically, I went down to visit my friend who moved to the seaside, and I took a train to go see her from London, and it took 2 hours one way. So I had a good 4 hours on a train, and I had a little table and everything, and I took my laptop with me, and then I just worked on making comments on the PDF of Project Rose. And here we are now. After I finished reading it, I was overwhelmed with a really, really strange feeling, which is I didn't know what to do with myself. When I finished reading it, I missed my own characters. I thought these really had given me the feeling of a found family, and I was so happy that the main theme, that the main thing I wanted to transpire in this book worked out, at least for me, when I reread it, and that it just gave me that warm fuzzy feeling by the end of I don't want to leave those characters and I want more adventures with them. And I knew then, yeah, I'm definitely gonna have to do these revisions very soon. So all I've done is actually write them down in this PDF. As I said, 379 comments. I've not done anything else with them, so I haven't actually done the revisions themselves. But I am currently still working on my line edit of Demons, so I think my next step may be swapped around with the Space Princess project, and I might have a look at Project Rose sooner than I expected, just because I really want to write book 2 and continue the series and just continue this adventure for Rose and her friends and her team. I just enjoyed myself rereading it and wished that there was more to continue reading, except that I didn't write anymore. That's it. I just sort of wanted to talk through this project a little bit more in detail, give you more insight about it, because I've never properly sat down to give a full synopsis of it and everything. I felt such warm feelings at the end, and I felt so good about my own story that I'm hoping this can transfer onto you guys if you're watching this and you're struggling with a story, or you're at a different stage in your process. Whichever stage you're at, I hope that at some point when you reread your own work, you're going to be happy about it, because that's just the best feeling in the world. And even if this doesn't get published the way I want it to, even if it doesn't get the reception I wish for it to have, at the end of the day, I first and foremost write for myself, and this is a story I wrote for myself. And then hopefully I get to share it with other people and they get to be as happy about it as I am. But yeah, hopefully this was a positive message and gave you positive vibes. I hope that you enjoyed this video. If you liked it, please leave a like, leave a comment down below. I always try to respond. Consider subscribing to my channel. That always helps me. Ring that bell, all that jazz, and I will see you guys in the next one.